Hey, welcome to the Insurance Buzz. This is your host, Michael Weaver, and we've got special guest today, Mr. Andy Arter. Andy, how are you today?
Doing unbelievable, and I really mean that. How about you?
Man, if I was any better, I don't know what I would do with myself.
That's a good place to be in. Good to see you, Michael.
Absolutely. So, Andy, let's start off with who is Andy Arter?
Yeah, so Andy Arter, I'm a 32-year-old father and husband, first and foremost. I live in the Gulf Coast of Florida, currently oversee sales for a company called Team Hired, which is an insurance-specific recruiting firm. But, to be honest, they say you stumble into things. I think that for me, I just followed, a lot of my passions and tried to figure out how could I, find a career for me that, could be fruitful, but also allowed me to use, my gifts, my passions to help people. And so really early on in my career, when I graduated school and got my, first big boy job, I guess they call it, I went into this corporation in an inside sales role, which was give him all the dirty work, all the spreadsheets, all the new CRMs to figure out, help the older sales guys and girls with their systems. So it was really more of a sales support role. And it was great because I got a chance to sit back and observe for 3 years from a distance these big multi-million-dollar contracts. And this was a $1.2 billion company that made LED lights, nothing to do with insurance, right? But it was great, and I took a lot of pride in being part of a company that manufactured American-made products, and you could walk out on a 1 million square foot factory floor and see the magic of that. So I think it was a really good first spot for me, but it was a big corporate structure, and I really felt like to grow, I had to get in an uncomfortable spot. So I went and joined a much smaller company, $1.2 billion company to a $6 million company, right? And so totally the wheels fly off. I go into that role, and they're like, all right, these are pink sheets. This is where you take credit cards. People call in, you call them. And this is Kathy. She runs the production floor. So I'm going, wow, I just went from a 1,200 employee company to a 32 employee company. There's 2 salespeople. The other sales guy's an engineer, and he's 70 years old. And he's great, right? But he's not a sales guy. So that was awesome for me because they wanted systems. So they said, you came from a big company that crushes it in the manufacturing space. What did you guys how did you think about data? How would you approach a CRM system? Were there efficiencies on the return process? So it was interesting because I was 24, 25 years old, and they were almost looking up to me just because where I came from. And I realized the power of knowledge. You can take information from a much larger company that as a sum total is so much greater than yourself. But if you actually learn it, you can bring that forward to the next spot or to other people, which is you're a great example of that. And so I left that job in 2016 to pursue, I'd call my life-changing job, the career-changing job, the one that scares you, that you got to go through all the failures and the crashes. And it was that I read a bunch of sales books from Grant Cardone, and I loved it. I loved Sell or Be Sold. I loved the 10X rule. In fact, my wife and I were on our only vacation we ever took. I think to this day, we got to get there. And we were driving up from North Carolina to go see my parents in Ohio and then go back to New York. And we listened to the entire 10X rule. And it was just talking about this kind of broken mindset of society, thinking small, the scarcity mentality, and what it would actually take to be successful, sort of this all-in mentality on life. And I was like, this is my new mentor, because I've always thought that way. I always thought there was more for me. I didn't think that making 60 grand a year in a small town, thinking that I was the bee's knees, was for me. I was like, I want to go get some wealth. I want to get some experience, and I want to go see if you can actually do this thing. So we went on a flight down there. I walked in the office and asked for a job, and to my surprise went through 2 or 3 hours of interviews. Met with the director, met with the VP, got a call from the COO 2 days later. She asked me one question. She's like, I have one question for you. And I'm like, oh geez, no pressure. She's like, what would it mean for you to get this opportunity? And I said it would mean everything. It would be life-changing. It would be the only opportunity like this that I ever get. Okay, we'd like you to start in 2 weeks. And I was staring at my phone holy cow. So we had a house, we had a mortgage. My wife had a career that she loved, which is things they don't talk about, right? Family decisions. And we went for it, and went dead broke got an eviction notice, thought we were going to go homeless. Like literally within 90 days, it was like way backwards. I'm like, I want that job that was making 60, like way more than this, but we just burnt the ships. There was literally no other option than to succeed. And so I learned a valuable lesson of follow-up. Like we talk about sales, marketing, most valuable lesson in follow-up I ever got is that I had done 99% of the work up to that point. I had called all the people, I had nurtured, I had like cultivated this field. And so out of my panic, I took my 8 spreadsheets that I had and I wrote down every lead that had something other than like a cross on it or a sad face, you know, like, oh, I think that guy might be interested. He didn't yell at me. And I took those, it was like 500 leads that I had called repetitively for like 3 months. And I took like the top 100 and I said, these are the only ones I'm calling for the next week. I called those, and I'll never forget, and big shout out if he's ever listening to this, Jeff Sikora with Nissan of Richmond in Virginia, called me back at 6 p.m. when I was about heartbroken. I'm like, I think we're like done. I think this is not good. And he's like, hey, I've been getting your voicemails. I'd like to talk to you tomorrow at like 8 a.m. Can I text you some questions tonight? So I'm at home panicking, texting this guy, trying to get it perfect, you know? And then all of a sudden, like I do the call with him the next day. It was like a $54,000 deal. We had a fire alarm, went and got tacos across the street, and he's like, I actually need to add my used car store. How much would that be? Turned into an $85,000 contract. And then I had another deal land the next week and another one the next week, and I made like 12 grand that month. And coming from the most I'd ever made was like 4,000. So I tripled my income off of just this like really ugly process of like, I'm gonna figure this out. And the rest wasn't history. I had a lot of up and down months, but by the time that I left Grants about 3 years and 1 month in, you know, I had learned what it meant to be a top 1% earner in the country. I'd learned what it meant to mentor other people. I had seen a company go from 30 people to 120 in 3 years, and the fanatical growth that Grant had for his company. And so a lot of people ask me, like, what was it like working for Grant? And a lot of times I tell them, like, or did you like him, or is he what he says he is? I'm like, yeah, he's absolutely what he says he is. And I love the guy because I think he saved my perspective, not my life, but he saved my perspective and saved me a lot of headache by trying to take the easy road and basically saying, like, hey, if you're willing to put in the work, like, this is what fierce business looks like. It's not pretty always. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices, and I made a lot of sacrifices, right? A lot. But at the end of the day, like, it paid off. And when I walked away from there, I thought I had made I'm like, how do I go, you know, grow more? What I didn't realize was it had nothing to do with the money I made there. The lessons that I'm today reaping from my experience with that company will carry with me for the rest of my life because it's an operating system. It's like you literally rewire your operating system. And so when I moved out of that company and eventually found myself at Team Hired, it's like I was able to take that experience and then apply it to this model. And the interesting thing about Team Hired is where Grant is much more focused on like the outbound marketing, the loud attention seek, like let me go enter a marketplace. I came to Team Hired and they're like, no, people come to us. Like we create such a good experience. So I think when you can combine both, right? When you can have the aggressiveness, the mindset of expansive growth, of never enough, of our team can always get better, who's going to make 300 phone calls today, combined with like this obsessive nature about servicing people, I think that's like the magic in business. So I'm in this place right now where I'm looking back going, okay, I don't know if I'd want to do all that again, but for some reason, like the puzzle pieces have come together into, you know, what I'm doing today. So I know that's a lot, and to tell you who I am and then tell you about my career tells you my career has been a big part of my life, but another huge part of who I am right now is a guy who's trying to figure out how to make sure that the biggest legacy I ever carry is like how I was as a husband, how I was as a dad. So I'm really enjoying life right now. It's a really, really fun process, and that's where we're at. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but that's a little bit about me and like how I ended up here. And then I've been with Team Hire for 2 years now, and been part of, you know, some of the growth. But I came into a company that was already very healthy. Came into a couple of owners that already knew what they were doing. So I've been learning here just as much as I learned at Grants. It's just different. I'm learning about recruiting. I'm learning about customer service. I'm learning about retaining your employees. Right? Like it's a totally different world. Anyway, so that's that.
No, man, I dig every single piece of that. So you've been I can't grant, man. I'm a big Uncle G fan. So I've been following GC for a long time. Literally one book, The 10X Rule. I'd recommend that book to every single salesperson, every single person I come in contact with. That book is an absolute must. So I got to ask, so you've been in sales for over a decade now with multiple companies. Now you're running a sales organization. So not only whatever you learned at Grant, but also those things that you've seen those highest performers do. Like if you could say 2 or 3 characteristics or traits that you have yourself, you've learned along the way, you've learned through the so-called failures that are just stacked on top of each other until you get the dubs. What would you say you see the highest performers, those top 1% of every company you've been a part of? What characteristics or traits are you seeing?
I'm picturing one guy in my head. I won't say his name. He shares the same first name as you. But he's a guy, like when you talk about a top performer, he's a guy that used to sell electrical distribution product. And the year that I met him, he made $1.2 million in commission from cold calls. And I was like, I gotta figure out what this guy's doing. He's like 42 years old. He's got 5 kids. Like he's crushing it in business. And he was always relaxed and positive. And I was like, he doesn't even look stressed out when he's doing it, you know? And so there's a couple things. The first one is that when he first started, he asked for a lot of help. Like he wasn't afraid of people's perspective. And it's something that I'm still trying to learn today is like we worry what other people will think of us, our leaders, our mentors, our bosses, if we just say like, I don't know. But he was the type of guy that he just kept saying, I don't know, help me, help me, help me. And I think that because of that, he was able to just like get out of his own way, you know, and really just download like techniques, strategies that would work without being emotional about it. The other thing is, I'd say he taught me you need to acquire time early in your career to work on yourself. Like you need to actually just value like the ability to step away from this program we're in and step away from like that grind for even just a few minutes and start to actually like breathe. And it's something that, yeah, of course, under pressure, like that's a great life lesson to have. And I just told you a story of immense pressure that I was under, but at the same time, I was watching him, and he was paying the valet before he had the money. You know, and I'm like, Mike, why do you pay a valet $20? You know, he's like, oh, because it gets me an extra 3 minutes with my wife and kids. Like when I'm with them, I'm all in with them, you know, so that I can have the energy at the office. And I started to, you know, see all these things happen. And all of a sudden, I'm like paying somebody else to mow our lawn. Where I come from, you mow your own lawn. You buy a John Deere, and same with my wife, right? We both grew up in the country. But paying lawnmowers, and you got to have that. I learned like he had to have those conversations at home. So I started to have those conversations at home that like he had gotten his entire family on board with this idea of a lifestyle of abundance, a lifestyle of success, a lifestyle of freedom to like, you know, actually go out and acquire the targets you want without fear of judgment. And so I always saw him that he didn't let people bring him down. He was always like, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to acquire time. I'm going to follow what the owner's doing. And that's probably the third tip. Follow the money was a lesson that I know he learned from Grant, but I saw him do it every day. He wasn't thinking that, you know, you have a new product, it's a new insurance policy, but I really like to sell auto. That's what I'm best at, right? That would be like an amateur mindset compared to what this guy was on, because he's like, you guys want us to sell event tickets? I want to become the best event ticket seller in the entire company. You want us to sell you know, training packages for a specific industry and try to sell marketing? I'm going all in on that. And it was like this immense excitement, I think, for him to just say, like, jump in with whatever the owner was excited about. And the funny thing about that is it takes humility, because we all want to think like we're the best, we know how to, like, let's work the system, right? It's like the system is the company. Like the system is wherever the company's going. So I saw a lot of people get distracted with what their comfort zone was. And he's like, yeah, what do you want me to sell? So kind of this unemotional attachment to like the actual, like any one product, and more like jazzed up about the company as a whole, like as a constituency. And I think clients could feel that too. And then the last thing, and I won't drag this one out much longer, but I'd say the one other thing I saw with him is he had a steel trap mind. He would not let customers get in his head, other salespeople, even leaders, right? When they're having a bad month and like they might project onto him, when he was on a phone call, it's like he was playing. Like he was just playfully going through a phone call, because he had spent so much time hearing objections and like making so many calls that eventually his experience caught up to him. And this is something interesting that I've never really shared with anybody publicly, but a company I was at looked at when salespeople pop, like when they go from average production to high production. And they measured a team of about 30 people. And they found out that for this company and this industry, the average number of phone calls that was required for somebody to really pop off, right, was 20,000 phone calls. And people fell within like 18,000 to 22,000. But there was nobody under 18,000. And very few people were with the company much longer than 20,000 calls if they didn't start to make money. So it was sort of a make it, break it. And they did this, we talked about it, and why is that? And it had nothing to do with some magical formula or algorithm. They're like, look, it's because the amount of time on the field, you gained enough experience to where you actually know what's going on. It's like the first time that you role play a word track, you don't know what you're saying, you don't know how to say it, so you have to read it off a sheet of paper. And then pretty soon you memorize it, but you still don't understand what you're saying. And then the third phase is like, I know the words, I don't have to look at the paper, I'm saying the words and they sound good. And number three, I actually understand them, so when I talk with you, like they're connecting, and as a customer, we've all felt the salesperson who's reading a script, or they're just going through the motions, or somebody who fully embraces it. And so when I look at like him or others, it's like they fully embrace like this idea that I am the product, like I need to understand everything about this, I need to put myself on the phones, even if I don't feel like it, because I'm just not going to get good if I only make 3,000 phone calls a year. Like, you're not going to break science of experience. So it's like, people are like, oh, you don't have to wait for experience. I'm like, I think part of it is experience, but you don't need to wait 5 years to get that experience. Increase your activity so that you decrease the amount of time it takes to get that experience. And so, yeah, those are some of the big points from him. Nobody's ever asked me that, by the way. That's a great question.
Man, we getting buzzed on the buzz today. That is so good. Like, all right, there's a couple things that just stood out to me right there. So, number one, ask for help. Number two, which I personally think is the best thing you can ever do, invest in yourself, period. Like, if you're investing in yourself, you're growing. If you're not growing, you're getting worse. Following the money, I dig that. You said one thing when you started the conversation about Michael, and that was how positive he always was. And I think positive, optimistic salespeople. I don't know if you've ever read the book Happiness Advantage, but if you haven't, I'd highly recommend reading that book. But basically, like statistically speaking, through lots of research, optimistic and positive salespeople outperform the most skilled salespeople, but that have a negative mindset every single time and by a large margin. So I love that you hit on that. And man, there's just so many good things that you just, and the best part about what you just said is you were willing to grow, learn, you were asking for help. And I think the last thing that you said really stuck out to me, because it's kind of like that old 10,000 hour rule. I don't know if you've ever, but like 10,000 hours to master your craft. Like, so many people will give up, or they're not patient with the process. They're not willing. Look, if you in sales especially, lack of production equates to lack of activity. In life, if you're not accomplishing the goals you have in life, is because of lack of action and lack of activity. You have to put in the work. You got to do it and do it and do it and do it until you become the master. Like, you know, that 10,000 hour rule. Like, you got to put the 10,000 hours in to really get comfortable and confident and master whatever you're trying to master.
Absolutely. And something I've been thinking with a lot lately, and I don't want to sound too like space age or crazy, but if I do, I guess that's okay. I've been really thinking a lot about energy, like the energy we put into our businesses, the energy we put into a sale, and how when you can scale a business, essentially you find a way to better, more efficiently harness that energy or convert that energy. So when you hire somebody, like, you're hoping that they bring their all their best. That's why we want to hire great people, because they're going to bring 80, 90, 100% of their energy to work. But people that only bring 20%, we can feel that in an interview. We can try to motivate them and train them, but it's difficult, because it's like training is like building the car, but the actual like energy behind that person is the fuel. So you could have the best of the best training in the entire world, but you've got to like combine into that training like more of an all-encompassing, like, where's your life and how do you get linked up to give maximum energy to this. And so when you talk about like let's go hire some assistants in the Philippines that will make some service calls for us, that's all about acquiring energy, right? Really, like you're converting dollars to energy, and those dollars came from energy. So when you talk about that positive piece, it doesn't surprise me that is the outweighing factors, that optimistic and positive view, because that is what that is like solution-oriented energy that you're bringing to the table, and how can you not win? And I've been watching you in the mornings do your morning meditation. Like you do have coffee out there by the water, and it's beautiful. Like is that something you do every single day, or is that?
Yeah, man, it's it's my daily success routine. It's been, and look, I went through a stage of my life just here recently that was like not great. I got away from my success routine. I picked up the booze. Like I was just it was weird. But my wife and I, it's funny you bring this up, we were just talking about this yesterday, is I've been back in this now for about 4 months. And the 3.5-4 years prior to that, I was like a machine, like wake up at 5 a.m., and now I'm back in that, and there is a significant difference. Not that I enjoy waking up at 5 a.m. every morning. It actually sucks. It sucks to do that, but if I can accomplish something that sucks to start my day, like I can accomplish whatever in that day. So yeah, man, a daily success routine brings me joy. That's why I do it. And so that's actually something new that I've actually incorporated into my routine, is just a coffee, just relax, take in nature. Because before it was all very regimented, and it still is in the very beginning, like wake up, 12-minute workout, get in the sauna, like, read, meditate.
First thing in the morning.
So yeah, man, that one little tweak is that 30-45 minute tweak of that meditation, coffee, or really just the coffee, sitting in silence, enjoying nature, taking it in. And that's been something, and I put on a book too. But that's been something that's really good. So I appreciate you. You have any daily success routines you do?
I've created one recently, and it's made a big difference. And basically, I take myself back to school, but I go towards things that make me feel good. So, like, instead of training on things that, I need to work on that whole idea is broken anyway, right? Like, I'm lacking in something. Like, no, we're always in a process. So I think that for me, like, being able to take an idea of how do I supercharge being calm? How do I supercharge marketing presence? How do I, that has driven much different content. So I've just basically gone and dropped my kiddo off on school. I take him on a golf cart, and so I have this 20 minutes in the open air, right, to play something, and then come back and I sit down and I'll take a notepad out and I'll literally go through class for 30 minutes before the day even starts, before the business is up and running, and take it like a student. And it's been really cool because it's the first time in my life I think I've actually enjoyed learning, because I'm doing it for me. It's not somebody else telling me to. And it kind of breaks my heart, honestly, dropping my kid off at school every morning, because I'm like, he doesn't understand why. It's going to take him a long time to understand this. I don't even understand it. Nobody came to my door and knocked, but we sure as heck registered him and sent him in. So it's like, when does that happen, And so yeah, that's been it for me, just taking a few minutes to learn every day.
Yeah, man, I love that. But I think you said the biggest thing is it makes you happy, and I think I think that if you do things, I'm a big mind, body, soul. If you're taking care of those three things every single day, then you're going to be a much happier individual. You're going to enjoy what you're doing. You're going to be able to make a better positive impact on not only yourself but those around you. And so I love that, brother. No, congrats. So. And we could talk about that all day long.
Yeah, we could. We definitely could.
So let's get on to. So obviously you're with Team Hired, man. You guys, and I personally just had an amazing experience with you guys. But I want to talk about recruiting trends, like what you guys are, because I believe the market, and maybe I'm wrong here, and what I'm seeing, but I believe the market has shifted over the last quarter, it feels like. So what are you guys currently seeing from a recruiting trend standpoint, maybe some data, things like that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just from an economic standpoint, trying to understand, why people are struggling with hiring right now. And it's never just one thing, right? There's a lot of variables, but I think understanding first and foremost that, the pandemic and all that definitely had a major impact on people's psyche. I think most of us felt that. I know I could speak for myself and say that it made me wonder why we run at such a fast pace as a country. Like, what is this thing that we're doing? And I think a lot of people by default end up in careers and jobs that they didn't necessarily choose for themselves, or they did, but it was influenced by maybe a father or mother in college influencing what degree they're going to get, or it's going to be influenced by a friend that they used to look up to that, now in perspective, they're like, I don't actually look up to that guy, but when I was 18 years old, like, I ended up in the food business. Like, how'd that happen? So when you look at just that pause, like when you stop and you like take that morning break, for instance, bringing it back to the coffee, it forces you to like actually look at things for what they are. And I think a lot of people just shifted their mindset. A good statistic to work off of is like 1 in 67 jobs was remote prior to COVID. Now it's 1 in 7. And that's not job ads, that's actual physical jobs. 1 in 7 are remote now. And so people were sent home remote, to work. A lot of people were. And then for some companies that just stuck, or they, are having a hiring problem and they said, well, I'm not finding great talent in my backyard, but I bet if I hired within 300 miles of my office, I could find a lot more good people, which is, probably true. So when you look at that in general, it's like, okay, people's expectations shifted. They have a different mindset about work. They don't feel as enslaved to like, oh, I got to go get a job. It's more about like, what do I want to do and what's my life experience? And so combine that with the fact that after the pandemic, all of a sudden you've got all of these companies restarting, paying back their PPP loans, opening doors, getting people back in the office, adjusting from an economy that didn't come to a standstill, but a lot of people hung on tight, to go, oh, this wasn't as bad as we thought. Like, buildings aren't burning. It doesn't look like 2008. Holy cow, we're still in business. I don't know how that happened, but we kind of floated through that thing, right? And all of a sudden, it's like, well, I need to grow. And you've got the big corporations and all the big companies saying, we want to take market share, we want to grow, and there's this digital disruption. And so what does everybody do? They run and they all go try to hire, yet you've got far less candidates looking for new jobs right now, and far more companies actually hiring. So I think the first lesson here is let's understand that like there's way more employers looking for that diamond in the rough than there are diamonds in the rough, right? Like it's just not it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Like if you were the only guy at a bar, you were a single guy, you were looking for a married life, and there were like 20 women, right? If all 20 women think that it's impossible that they don't walk away with you, they're crazy. Like if they look at that and say 20-to-1, there's going to be one woman here who ends up with this person. Like to think that you could break the laws of physics and break you into 20 pieces and give you to 20 people is impossible. So when you think about any market in America, if you just go onto like job boards and you take a look at the number of job posts just for sales alone, it's in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. I just looked at Dallas the other day. There were like 13,000 sales jobs in Dallas, Texas. So, are there 13,000 candidates looking for work? For sure. It's probably 30,000, a million, whatever. But are there 13,000 people that fit what they want? Are there 13,000 people with the mentality, the history, like the coachability? And there's not. So there is a scarcity of great hires to be had. And the approach that used to be taken, and still is in many respects, was, well, let me go find the diamond in the rough. I better become attuned to what they look like. Can I find them on LinkedIn? Let me maybe headhunt them. I'll message them. And so when I heard of Team Hired, I was actually in need of hiring somebody, and I had done that. I had gone on LinkedIn, I had done very curated interviews, I had wasted a lot of time on no-shows, and I was getting worn out. And what I realized was I need to talk to more people. And so I dumped a bunch of money into job ads and got like 500 applicants. And then I realized something. This is the proper size of leads list for me to make a hire. I know that. I tried 100 applicants, it's definitely this. But I don't have the time to work this. Just like I don't have time to work 500 sales leads today, right? And so Dave, who founded Team Hired, he and I had stayed in touch, and I asked him about Team Hired. He said, we could definitely help you out. Let's do something. So we put something together, and they sent like 15 people to our office in one day. Took them a week to get them there, 15 people. I hired somebody the next day. And I looked at that and said, okay, what just happened there? Team Hired went out and got probably 100 applicants, found maybe 30 that were good, maybe 40, invited them to an interview. Most of them didn't show up. The ones that did, there were like 3 good ones. One was the standout. She took the job. So it was like, okay, in order to, and this was post-COVID in an office in a very closed business park. I was like the only open business there with another guy, and we're some of the only people hiring. And I looked at that and said, okay, so the game of 2020 and 2021 and 2022 is not to get more particular about, let me go try to find that diamond in the rough, because I might be looking for that person for 6 months, and my business cannot afford that. Or I can go out and I can pull a lot of fish in the net and be non-emotional about it. Let me pull a lot of fish up on deck, and then I can look through it and say, okay, who stands out from this group? And I had I forget the agency. It was a very obscure kind of independent agency, but this owner had been in the game for a long time. And he said, the way I've always looked at hiring is it's not about finding the perfect hire, it's about finding the best hire that's available. And so I think that's something that like a lot of people get hung up on, because they have this idea that the home run employee, the home run team member, like they're going to hire one person and that one person is going to come in and like save the business. But that's not how it works, right? You create a great business and a great process. You have training, you work on your culture, you have solid onboarding, you take good care of people, you create career paths for them so they don't get bored or complacent, and you create the magic. It's not the other way around. It's not, I'm going to go hire a magical person that's going to make my business magical. There's no magical person that'll fix a magical business or a non-magical business, right? If you hire a magical person, somebody unbelievable, right? They're fantastic, but you haven't worked on your business. It's just like a marriage. Like, you can bring in the perfect potential spouse. They're beautiful, they're kind, they're loving, they're all the things that you would want in life. You have the same goals, but you haven't worked on you, that relationship is going to fall apart. So I think one of the biggest things that people need to do right now is, instead of looking out and blaming the market on like, oh, it's just subpar candidates, can't find anybody good, it's like, actually, businesses had to get better during the pandemic. And if you didn't make a major improvement to your business, maybe that's what you're feeling. Maybe you're feeling the fact that you haven't put in the time to build the processes, the systems, the structure, that you could go out and hire somebody who used to work at Macy's and help them become a millionaire someday. And like, I saw Dave, our founder, hire the janitor, and guy owns a major Allstate now, right? And like that mentality of, I'm going to create the opportunity and I'm going to pull people through the opportunity and create a bar and scream from the mountaintops that this is what we stand for and this is where we're going, and be open-minded to the fact that you are going to lose people, but the better you do at looking in on your business and creating systems that make people successful, the less people you'll lose. And Michael, sorry to like fire hose you here, man, but I have one more that I was just thinking with that I really like want your audience to hear. And when you think about this concept of like going out, building a business, hiring people, getting them on board, and getting this thing cranking, like when you go out and you experience this speak amongst other people about negativity about hiring, you have to stay away from it, because you'll hear things like this. Oh, I used to hire that way, but there's so much churn. I used to be less choosy, but there's so much turnover. And it's like, okay, let's look at that for a second. The only reason a company experiences churn is because either A, the expectations they set up for that person's life inside your business didn't match, so fix that, or number two, you haven't dug in and audited the reason for that churn and then dealt with it. Because there's always something within your control, whether it's the way that you pay people, whether it's the way that whether it's the music you play and the lighting in the office when they walk in, right? Like little things. It could be 1,000 different things, but that's the main thing for me, is looking at the market going, okay, we expect people to come like help us grow our business, but we got to put in time on the business again and think about that. And as an analogy, and I'll just leave you with this, is you remember hearing about or reading in school that there used to be like spice routes, and there were these big ports of boats that would roll in, and like it was seasonal. So they'd hire people from a town to go out and fish or go look for gold or do whatever. And then they'd come back like within a certain number of months. And there's still communities like this today that go out and fish for months at a time. And I was thinking about that with hiring. I'm like, I think that's what's going on right now. You've got a limited number of people walking down to port, and you've got a ton of boats lined up. They're all on different adventures to go get different things, right? Let's go sell insurance. Let's go sell cars. Let's go get gold. And then you've got like 1,000 boats and 100 people walk down. And I'm like, I want to go to the boat that's playing the loudest music, where they're smiling, they're having fun, they're winning, like they're transparent, they pay well, they have a warm place to sleep at night instead of like getting hypothermia, they've got a doctor on staff for if I get sick, and that's the boat that I'm going to go to. And it's so easy, right? Like I know it's not going to seem like it for anybody struggling with hiring, but it's literally so easy when you have fun with it and think about, where would I want to work when I was 20? What could I create that would be magical? You're not Google, and that's your advantage. You're not Google. There's no seat at the table for somebody at Google. There's a seat at the table with you. You get to be their mentor. So anyway, I went on a high horse there, and I'll jump off.
No, man, you hit on so many great things right there. I mean, number one, the statistic of 1 in 7 folks now working remotely, that is that's mind-boggling. That's a lot higher than I was expecting. But the group interviews, like, I got to tell you, that is something that has been just watching you guys. It's been a game changer. Like, that is something I will always do from here on out, regardless if I'm teamed up with you guys or doing it myself. Like, the group hires it's so efficient, and you instantly, like in my experience, within 5 to 10 minutes, you automatically can narrow down a group of 20 people to like 3 to 5 that you think you'll be interested in, and then 10 more minutes in the call, you're like, oh, just that 1 or 2 people. So it's so good. But what you're really hitting on here, and I love it, is and my wife and I, Courtney and I have talked about this on podcasts before, but are you developing a culture that's attracting, the talent you want to attract? Are you attractive? Like we all need more people, but are you actually attractive to people? Because in the other thing you said is, look, people don't leave jobs, people leave people. Like, if you, period. And that's self-accountability. I think going in and auditing, if you are having a high churn right now, high turnover, like, what is the reason for that? It's not because of the job. It's either your culture, your processes, lack of training, lack of compensation. What does that look like? Lack of fun in the workplace? Like, you have to be willing to adapt and adjust. I mean, if you're still trying to lead people like you were in the early 2000s, late 90s, you're probably struggling right now. And so I love that you hit on that. So you talk to agencies all over the country from different companies. So you have your pulse on the agent network a lot and agency owners. And I think you hit on this, but I want to go back. What are 2 to 3 things from a culture standpoint that you would absolutely be like, if you could work on something? So obviously, I think winning attracts winners. I think fun attracts people. But what else from a culture standpoint, when thinking about building that championship team, that championship culture, would you recommend?
And real quick, as a side note for your audience who may not know it, if I'm sitting here listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, like, is this just another corporation that's got fancy word tracks for like an article, And I just want to point out the fact that the 2 guys that I work for were scratch Allstate agents that they produced about $200 million in premium in their career with Allstate before, building team hired. So when I talk about this stuff, it's from a shared place of experience working with these guys closely and our entire team, that they've been through the paces, they've been there, they've grown the agency, they've had the struggles. So this isn't coming from some like textbook. This is coming from 2 guys that each had 50 team members full time under their Allstate hats, and did it for 10 years and did it very successfully. So a lot of this I really attribute back to like Dave Williams and Tom Bianco, the guys who started this thing, because it allowed them to maintain over 90% retention in some of the largest books of business in the entire country in terms of captive insurance. And so a lot of people look to these guys like, what were you doing? How did you grow that? And I'd say for the culture piece, one of the first things is having non-negotiables. And this is something that I know Dave learned, and I learned it too from a guy by the name of JJ Giacontelli, who was the COO of the Rick Case Automotive Group in Florida. And if you're not familiar with them, they're like a top 20 auto group, and also their customer service is known as just first class, unbelievably great customer service because of Rick and Rita Case, who founded the thing. And JJ said at Rick Case Automotive Group, we look up their figures, they probably do $4 billion a year in cars. He said, we have non-negotiables for everything. So we have things that we will not negotiate on with ourselves or with our team members. So like if you adopt, and I'm not going to put those theories into your world, right? But if you're going to adopt an idea that we only allow positivity in our business, we do not allow negativity, then that becomes a non-negotiable, which means if you're going to project negativity into the workspace and be problem-oriented instead of solution-oriented, we can all agree to that. If you violate that multiple times, you got to go, and everybody knows it. And so what that does is it protects everybody. It protects their hearts, their spirits, because they're like, I am in an environment that's not going to get out of control. What I signed up for and was what I saw is being maintained by the owner. Whereas if you let those things infiltrate your business and they are negotiable, or you allow a little bit of it, like all of a sudden the people that were so sold on the dream of your company are like, this isn't the company it used to be. You know, I don't want to work here anymore. That's why that happens, right? Is you let other people influence the business. So non-negotiables, huge. And that could be something as simple as like non-negotiable. We pick up the phone on the first ring. Our customers are going to feel us the second they call, because we're picking up first ring. That's a non-negotiable in our business. If you decide that today, right, don't negotiate with that if you really made that decision. The second one I'd say is role play. Consistent role play and consistent practice. At Grant's office, I know at Dave's offices, at many companies that I've worked with, they've made it a regular practice to start their day with some training. So start their day by refreshing with some new information. Clear out yesterday, start thinking about present moment. What can I do today to get better? And then followed up with an actual real life role play. And I'm not talking about the type of role play where you make each other feel good. I'm talking about, sitting across from somebody who might have been selling a year or two longer than you. They're more confident, they have more swagger, and they're unafraid to tell you flunk. And those are the best five-letter word I learned at Grant's was flunk. And it hurt like a dagger for the first month, because I'd be with a veteran, role playing. Dave, I understand you're not interested. And look, and he'd be like, flunk. Oh, that hurts so bad, and do it again. Hey, Dave, it's blah, 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 blah. Flunk. What did I do? You did it this way. Do it again. Over and over and over. And in my first month at that company, I didn't get through the first sentence without getting flunked. It was just this refinement of not perfection, but how well can you embrace these words? And then once you do that, something really magical starts to happen on your team. They start to, instead of just copy things they role play, they start to understand the operating system behind that, the psychology behind that, and you'll hear your team come up with their own stuff. They'll be role playing, and once they get down the basics of what you're teaching them, they'll bring their own to it, right? And I saw that a lot with guys. I've done it myself, where there's all those things that we're comfortable saying, there's things we might not be comfortable saying. For instance, I might want to come across on a phone call as high altitude expert. I'm going to come in and just, pinpoint the problem, and I got you. I'm the maverick, right? But somebody else might want to come in and say, that's not me, and the words on this sheet don't make me feel good because that's not me. And so, it's really important to get the team role playing what you have, and then, do it enough to where they just start swinging that bat, and they're like, try this, turn the bat 2 inches to the left, turn your wrist, I can knock that thing an extra 10 yards. And that's what happens in sports, right? You first learn the basics, and you have to repetitively fall on your face, flunk, have somebody that's been there before say, hey, you might come up with your own stuff one day, but this is the playbook. And so we did that every day at Grant's for 30 minutes, every day for 3 years. It was non-negotiable. You don't show up for role play and you don't have a good reason, you're going to get written up. You do it twice, see ya. And the reason behind that was this. Grant said, I will not allow my salespeople to practice on my customers, ever. And that hit home for me, because I was like, that's exactly what people do every day. They read a sales book, they do 2 or 3 role plays ever, they go into their day getting no better than they were the day before, and then they practice. And the other thing of the role play is people default to what they know. So if you put me in a situation, Michael, on this podcast that I don't know where I'm going, and I haven't been there before, what am I going to go back to? I can only go back to what I already know. And so you see people they don't get past that ceiling in sales because they're not practicing. So I would say, as important as those 20,000 phone calls is that those 20,000 phone calls were coupled with 30 minutes a day of role play, sometimes on Saturdays too. And then the third piece for culture, I'd say, is driven from the leader of empathy, and of a leader who can get alongside their team and help pull them forward, and when they're broken, be broken with them, and when they're growing, grow with them, and when they're winning, egg them on with your life depends on it. Make them feel great about it, right? And help them understand like you're in their corner no matter what. And I think I hear from a lot of business owners over the years, like, this mentality of like, well, if they don't cut it, they don't cut it. And I agree. There's a point where if you don't cut it in sales, like, it doesn't make sense to have you in the business. You should maybe go to a different business. But there's not one time at Team Hired that I've had like an off production month or something's going wrong in the sales world, and Dave or Tom don't pull up alongside and non-judgmental, not from a standpoint of like, how do like, what's going on, or is there a problem? Because that creates anxiety, and that creates people that don't want to talk to their owners because they're afraid of what that's going to feel like when they have that conversation. So they don't say anything at all. Now the business owner is cut off from everything happening in their sales organization, and they can't fix it because nobody wants to talk to them. So what I noted with Dave and Tom is like, they'll say like, how can we help you hit your goals this month? How can we help you get where you're going? How's the family doing? How is this impacting your family? Do you need anything? We did this is this for you. Can I do anything else? Can I give you this? Can I give you that? And it's this investment into the team versus an expectation of, you're a production unit for me, you're a number, and if you don't hit your number, like, we got a problem. And somehow me telling you have a problem is going to fix it. No, what's going to fix it is somebody older and wiser than them. Maybe not older, right? But somebody wiser than them, somebody more experienced who's been there, who can calmly address that situation and remove them from the fear. But I think a lot of times in negative cultures, we try to use fear, uncertainty, and these things to try to poke people and drive them, and that's just the totally wrong thing to do. Like, 1 in 10 people can make it through that. The other 9 are going to fail. So, like, the one thing I saw with Dave and Tom for sure, they're like 9 out of 10 will succeed versus 1 in 10 will fail. They're like 9 out of 10 will succeed, and the 10th one we will go above and beyond for until their last breath before they want to leave us. So those are the big 3, I would say, is the role play, the non-negotiables, and then just this, I don't know how to describe that, but I'd say just servant leadership.
I dig all 3 of those, my man. That's good, Andy. I know you got to be. I know you got to be rolling. So let's wrap this up. I appreciate your time today, brother. If somebody wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to follow you on social, contact you? What does that look like?
Dude, I'm going to do something crazy, and I get a lot of flack for this, but I only live one life, so I'm giving my cell phone. And before anybody can say anything, it's area code 702-960-2290. And if it became that big of a problem, I'll just get a different number. But so far, stuff just keeps flowing in. People call me. They're like, hey, I saw you, you want to talk. So I'd say my cell phone, text me, call me. I'm completely open to that. My email, andy@teamhired.com. Which also, if you just go to teamhired.com, you can learn a lot about our company. And then I'm big on connecting on LinkedIn as well. So if you just go on LinkedIn and search my name, Andy Arter, Arter, I should pop up on there. You'll see my picture, and that would be an awesome way to connect as well. So.
All right, my man. I love that. If you guys don't follow Andy, make sure you do that. Andy's one of the best out there, one of the more positive people I've been around. And so, Andy, thank you so much for your time today, brother. I appreciate you. For all of those listening, as you all know, time is the most valuable and important asset that we all have. I appreciate you spending the last almost hour with Andy and I. So go out and make it great, my friends.
Thank you.